Many hundreds of years ago, 5 tribes were engaged in a terrible and bloody conflict with no end in sight, until the arrival of Dekanawida, the Great Peacemaker, who traveled between the tribes of the Oneida, Mohawk, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca with a message of friendship and unity. The Great Peacemaker's message was radical, but ultimately successful. After long negotiations, Dekanawida planted a tree on the land of the Onondaga tribe in what is now New York State. The chiefs of the 5 tribes were summoned and agreed on a peace treaty, sealed through burying their weapons at the foot of the tree. This tree of peace became a symbol of solidarity and immortality. Its symbolic roots, spreading north, east, south, and west, provided a pathway for others seeking to join the League to find peace too. The chiefs of the tribes would meet between its branches to discuss how to preserve the Great Peace. And this peace was great, lasting centuries, even enduring the great disruption of colonialism. To this day, the Haudenosaunee Nation still bestows the title of Tree of Peace to this sacred tree, the white pine. You're listening to Plant Connection. Life today can feel overwhelming, like we've drifted away from its natural rhythm. This podcast is your space to slow down, breathe, and rediscover the peace and clarity that come from reconnecting with the natural world. I'm your host, Lisa Cutshaw. Let's reconnect, one plant at a time. The white pine has great symbolic power to the Haudenosaunee Nation, sometimes called the Iroquois, which today governs parts of New York State, Pennsylvania, Ontario, and Quebec. The tree's clusters of 5 needles represent the 5 nations joined as one, and the tree remains the centerpiece of the seal of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Though steeped in legend, the story of the Great Peacemaker is founded in fact, and marks a revolutionary and enduring democratic success, which strongly influenced the framework of the United States Constitution. And though the original Tree of Peace has long passed, the symbol lives on. Even the burying of weapons underneath the roots of a tree, which incidentally is the origin of the phrase, bury the hatchet. Back when the Great Peacemaker walked the land, white pines would have been ubiquitous. When colonial settlers first arrived on the continent, they were met by huge, seemingly endless forests, where white pines soared above the canopies of other trees. Sometimes referred to as the sequoia of the East, these pines were reported to reach up to 230 feet tall. You'll note my ominous use of the past tense. As you might have guessed, these forests didn't last long once settlers arrived. White pine is an excellent timber wood, light yet strong, versatile, easy to carve, resistant to decay, and straight and true. So colonialists used it to build just about everything, which led to the decimation of these old-growth stands. The tallest trees among them were prime targets, and none of those reported giants remain today. These days, the tallest white pines are just shy of 190 feet. Given that these trees can live up to 400 years and keep growing all that time, it's likely to be quite a while before the reemergence of the giants of the past. Yet these white pines were essential for colonial expansion. In the 19th century, Chicago lumber yards saw 250,000 pines pass through their saws in a single year. This timber was fueling the expansion of settlers through the Great Plains and beyond, through providing materials for new houses, roofs, barns, and bridges. If you needed wood, white pine was the wood of choice. It was also the fuel of choice. It burned well and was a vital source of heat during the winter. So it's no surprise that it's considered a foundation of American life. As botanist and author Donald Culross Peattie wrote, "No other tree has played so great a role in the life and history of American people." Though only 1% of the old-growth white pine forest still stands, they remain important and magical places. White pine, or Pinus strobus in scientific words, is native to northeastern North America, where they form an invaluable part of the region's ecology. White pines are foundation species, which means they have an outsized role in the ecosystem, through their influence of the transfers of energy and nutrients. They're huge trees, and so their physical presence provides habitat and shelter, and even influences microclimates, which has huge knock-on effects on the other organisms that share these ecosystems. Directly, we can see this role in how they provide food for many animals. Animals such as red squirrels, white-tailed deer, and pine siskin eat the seeds. Crossbills, another bird species, have even evolved a special mechanism to reach these seeds, a twisted beak that can tease out the tender seeds from within the pine cones. The bark is also consumed by some mammals, including rabbits and porcupines. In fact, the bark has provided food for people too. The Algonquins used to collect the soft inner bark, or cambium layer, of white pine and other evergreens in times of winter hardship. When dried and pounded, it could be used as a flour. This custom led to the Iroquois referring to their neighbors as Adirondack, meaning tree eater. And this name, of course, lives on in the mountains of New York State. Other Native American tribes used other parts of the tree. The Ojibwe stewed young pine cones with meat to create a sweet meal. Pine resin has been used by many tribes as a means of waterproofing, for boats, buckets, or baskets, and even to treat infections. Aside from timber, white pine has taken on another cultural role in the centuries since colonization. Smaller white pines make great Christmas trees. They hold their needles well and are allergen-friendly, so there's a good chance you've shared your lounge with one of these cosmopolitan trees. For my own part, white pine has always been one of the trees I've felt the greatest affinity for, just on a personal level. At my grandma's house when I was a kid, on the hillside above the house, it was an old, I guess you'd call it a secondary growth area where years before it had been clear-cut and used as part of the farm where cows would graze. But there were no cows left in that part of the pasture, and so it was growing up with white pines. And if I went up on that hill, it was very private. No one could see me. And as a kid, there was a certain spot where I could walk just following the contour of the hillside back and forth behind this particular line of white pine trees. And it was a little magical, almost like a clubhouse or something. It wasn't a house, obviously. It was just an area under trees. But it felt private and beautiful to me. And I could go there whenever I needed to think. And so for me, I have that personal relationship with white pine trees. And I'm very lucky that I have white pine trees on the hill above my own house. If you want to grow white pine, you're in luck. It is versatile and it is relatively quickly growing for a tree. It likes well-drained or sandy soils and humid temperate climates. But one thing to watch out for is a disease that has plagued white pines for a century. In the 1900s, white pine blister rust, a fungal disease, arrived in North America, an accidental import from its native China. The fungus began killing off 50 to 80% of mature white pines, a huge mortality rate. Foresters determined that the fungus was using native gooseberries, or wild currants, as an intermediary host, and jumped into action. Landowners were encouraged to destroy all wild gooseberries and currants, which is why it's so rare to come across these plants today in New England. Planting these fruit bushes even remains illegal in some jurisdictions. But these efforts, although ecologically damaging, appeared to save the white pines. Today, the disease only kills about 3% of trees. And despite its reputation as a tree of peace, the white pine has played a role in war, too. When we think of the spark that led to the American Revolution, tea tax tends to take the limelight. But white pines had potentially just as big a role. The largest and straightest of these trees were highly desired by the British Royal Navy to make the masts for their ships, which in turn ensured their continued dominance over much of the world. Britain's domestic supply of mast trees had vanished long before, and they had spent much of the 1600s jostling with other colonial powers for the Baltic firs found in northeastern Europe, which were already in noticeable decline. So when they realized there were white pine forests within easy reach of North America's eastern seaboard, they thought they'd hit the jackpot. Surveyors scoured the forests of New England, marking any appropriate trees they found with the King's Broad arrow, 3 hatchet slashes converging in a point. This mark meant that the Crown had claimed ownership of the tree and nobody else could use it, including the people upon whose land the tree was found. At first, the marks were largely ignored, but when the British began to hand out large fines to rule breakers and made restrictions ever more, restrictive, landowners started getting riled up. After all, they depended on the timber from their lands for their livelihoods. Many mast trees met mysterious accidents at the hands of inexplicable fires or gales, and things came to a head in a number of violent incidents with names like the White Pine War and the Pine Tree Riot. A particularly aggressive chain of events in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1734 illustrates this well. One night, a team of surveyors were sleeping soundly in their lodgings after a full day of inspecting local sawmills to ensure compliance. They woke up to find themselves being dragged from their beds by armed locals who sent them running from the town. Their boss, Colonel David Dunbar, returned for revenge and began destroying the equipment of one sawmill. A neighboring sawmill responded by firing shots at the colonel and his team, forcing them to run away. This increasing animosity was a key factor in instigating the Revolutionary War. It's perhaps a telling sign that the first colonial flag that fluttered from Bunker Hill bore a white pine in its corner, and once the war was over, the newly United States used the trees for their own navy, even to build the masts of the famous USS Constitution. To this day, white pine lives on as a beloved symbol in New England. It's the state tree and state flower of Maine, featuring on license plates. White pine sprigs also feature on the flag of Vermont in a stained glass window of the Vermont State House. And if we visit our northern neighbors, white pine is the provincial tree of Ontario and has appeared on the flag and seal of the city of Montreal to represent the indigenous groups of the region. Stories about the personal significance of white pine are plentiful too. Author John Pastor recounts how the efforts of his carpenter father meant that he grew up surrounded by white pine furniture, beds, dressers, and wood paneling. Later he explored primeval white pine groves, which he describes as a different world. The images and smells of these big white pines over a maple understory in autumn remain for me the essence of what forest means. This led Pastor to unpack the conflicting feelings that I'm sure are shared by many listeners. The sorrow that so many white pine forests have been lost to logging, while being grateful that they provided the foundations of the North American society we enjoy today. But perhaps we can best value the white pine through their role in kickstarting the American conservation movement. Henry David Thoreau, a founding father of U.S. conservation, saw firsthand how the logging of white pine led to the loss of Maine's wilderness, and wrote extensively about white pines and their deforestation. After seeing a huge white pine tree fall to the axes of loggers, he wrote, "Why does not the village bell sound a knell? I hear no knell tolled. I see no procession of mourners in the streets of the woodland isles." Not long after, the Hudson River School of Painters, influenced by Thoreau among others, created huge paintings depicting intact and destroyed white pine forests, which created a visual rallying point for growing conservationist sentiments. These efforts contributed directly to the establishment of the Adirondack Forest Preserve, which hosts some of the last old-growth white pine forests in northeastern United States, and many further wilderness preserves as well. So when we want to sum up the value of white pine, their incredible significance, and the tragic losses they've endured, perhaps we should turn back to Thoreau. Here are his thoughts after seeing white pine logs being processed in a lumber mill. "It is not their bones or hide or tallow that I love most. It is the living spirit of the tree, not its spirit of turpentine, with which I sympathize, and which heals my cuts. It is as immortal as I am, and perchance will go to as high a heaven, there to tower above me still." Well said, Thoreau. Well said. Thank you for joining me on this journey back to nature with Plant Connection. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to tap subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss the next episode. See you next time.